Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Andre Lopez. After another summer of drought and heat waves, Angelinos will once again have to keep a close eye on their water use. The city of Los Angeles has introduced a conservation ordinance limiting residents to watering their lawns only 2 days a week. The Department of Water and Power will even issue fines to violators. On Point's Victor Bertato reports on what the restrictions are doing to Angelinos' lawns.
Brown is the new green. Signs like these are posted all over campus around CSUN, and this is a great way to advertise the new colors of lawns everywhere around the state, whether it's houses or around the school, around anywhere you might be. If you see brown, it's what it's supposed to be.
As you can see, I don't water my lawn anymore. I can't water anything here in the grass. Both my grasses are dead in the front and the back. And I had a pool, but I can't fill it up with water anymore or add water. I just can't, I have to save water everywhere I can.
The LA Times reported that there was about a survey with 9,000 people surveyed, and 71% of them said that the drought crisis is actually very serious, while 23% said that it's somewhat serious.
We don't have enough water for their lawns. That's sad, because California used to have beautiful grass. And now we have problems with the fires out in the hills. There's hardly any water. All that dry vegetation catches fire really fast, and it causes problems.
In a study found by the New York Times, they found that the average Californian uses about 83 gallons of water per day. The average San Francisco resident uses about 40 gallons per day. And in Riverside County, they use 137 gallons.
That was On Point's Victor Bertato. LA residents do appear to be following the restrictions, reducing their water usage to historic lows. LA Mayor Eric Garcetti says the month of August was the all-time lowest recorded water use in the city of Los Angeles. Water usage was down 10% from 2 years ago. But climate change is likely to have a lasting impact on the water supply in the entire state. Climate change is not only responsible for the increase in warmer temperatures and prolonged drought seasons, but it already is impacting our largest water sources in California. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are experiencing only about 25% normal capacity. The state estimates the Sierra Nevada snowpack will decrease by as much as 69% by the end of the century. Rising sea levels will also strain the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, one of Southern California's largest sources of fresh water. How long will Los Angeles residents be required to be under a water ordinance? On Point's Shailene Aguilera has more.
Thank you so much, Andre. With me, I have Professor William Bowen, who is a former professor from CSUN. I have Jill Lockard, a planetary science professor at Pierce College. Welcome, guys. We're going to start off with our first question. How long will LA have to live with the new water restrictions going on?
Well, I'm at a distance now. I'm up in Northern California.
Oh, you are? Okay.
But Los Angeles has, throughout its entire history, had to live with water restrictions of one sort or another. It was founded as a royal pueblo in the 18th century. So it's had a grave problem with water. And so the current situation is just the latest page in a huge book of crises that now stretch back almost 200 years.
And
so
the population
will live with the crisis almost forever.
The population has also been going up, which means that the demand is therefore also going up. I saw an article I was reading. NASA was wondering if, according to their models, California has about a year of water left. And so that's kind of the worst case of the scenarios on that. But I would say in terms of living with the restrictions, it depends on how well people follow them.
Okay, so then my next question would be for Professor Bowen. Are we responsible as residents here in LA, California, for these water shortages that are going on here in LA and California?
This gets to be a very complex issue. You do appreciate, I hope, that domestic water use throughout the entire state accounts for only 5% of the entire water budget of the state. The crisis is the allocation of water, not the lack of water. LA's resources are rather limited, but we have rather sizable resources if you look at it on the state level. Agriculture uses about 80% of the water of the state. it returns about 4% of the state's budget. Urban areas use roughly 10% to 15%. They return the other 95% of the budget. So it's an investment strategy, if you wish. You want to put your water bucks into something that returns very little value to a society, or do you want to put them into something that counts for a lot? Now, when I was a professor at Cal State Northridge, I used to ask each of my students what they thought they were worth. Because at that time, the water costs, and actual costs, not delivery and everything, but the actual water costs for each person in Los Angeles was about $10 a year. You think about that for a second.
Yeah.
You're worth more than $10 a year. So there are real historical issues, distribution issues, political issues. And in my dealings with the state's Department of Water Resources, long ago when I worked with the LA Department of Water and Power, up in the Owens Valley, in the San Joaquin Valley, it became very clear that there's an awful lot of water, but not for you.
All right, so then I'm going to toss in my next question over to Professor Lockard. What kind of consequences are we facing in not obeying these water restrictions?
I think what Professor Bowen said is correct. There is water, but LA is limited in terms of the availability of that water, the access we have to it. And so the consequences, there are cities around the world that have put in more severe restrictions, and they are now limiting a certain number of gallons each day to what their population is allowed to use. But I know right now they are already looking at putting in fines for people who are not obeying the restrictions. They're also putting in restrictors for people who continue to irrigate, because again, Professor Bowen is correct, the irrigation is one of the big consumers of water. And so they're actually going to start putting in restrictors that your showers and your sinks will work fine, but you cannot get enough water flow to irrigate. And so I think we're going to see more of the stick as opposed to the carrot coming up on that.
Okay. So my next question would be to both of you guys. Anyone can answer. Where does our water come from?
You want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I'll start, and then I know you have a lot of experience working with the at the state level on this, but a lot of our water is brought in from up north. You have the Mulholland Project and the canals, and a lot of it is being brought from higher up, such as Owens Valley region. And that's been going on for almost a century or so now. And so a lot of our water is basically imported from more up north. And then that goes to, again, what we're saying about the limited resources in LA. We're bringing in water from elsewhere.
I'll amplify on that a little bit. LA's situation is, like all the situations in California, rather complicated. Los Angeles has, because of early history and California's Supreme Court decisions, complete ownership of all the waters of the Los Angeles River. That means everything that falls into the San Fernando Valley, enters the aquifers, and later flows out through the river belongs to the city of Los Angeles. That is a city property. Bill Mulholland, over a century ago, realized that with the boom that was occurring with the oil industry, the railroads, many other things, that this was not going to be enough. So he did a couple things. First of all, he put meters on people's water outlets, and that leads to real solutions. I'll tell you, you start to charge people very high rates, you'll get their attention. But he also realized that the ultimate health of the city and its economy needed more. So he did go up to the Owens Valley and built a world-renowned system. It's been added on to, and we could talk about that. But that's not all. The city also gets water out of the Colorado River because the city belongs to the Southern California Metropolitan Water District. So it's a claimant on water in the Colorado River. And as you've been reading, I'm sure, in the LA Times, this This is a difficult situation in the drought. The Colorado River has shrunken to a small creek. But they also get water from Northern California over the Tehachapi's through the California Water Project. And that's bitterly contested in places like the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. I'm bombarded with TV ads every night from a congressman that says he's going to stop any diversions of the Sacramento River, which would lead its waters to enter into the California Aqueduct. And I'll mention something about the California Aqueduct. Its design capacity gives 90% of the water to the San Joaquin Valley farmers and 10% to Southern California metropolitan areas. So there's another interesting little bit to think about. You guys paid for it. They got it.
All right. My next question would be on dams. Do we have any dams or reservoirs here in LA? If so, are they effective?
I'll give you yours first shot because I talk too much.
So the aqueduct, the canal project, there are a series of dams to help bring the water down from further up north. In terms of being effective, well, they do provide reservoirs for water. The reservoir levels right now are very low. Basically all of them except, I believe I have it pulled up on another screen, all of them except about one right now are below the historical averages all throughout California. So in general, they are effective, but as water levels keep dropping down, perhaps less so. And so that's kind of a short answer on that. What do you have to add, Professor Bowen?
The reservoirs within the city itself are really for securing a constant flow level. They're not storage in the usual sense. You're probably thinking of Castaic. Oh, that's
Yes.
a pretty big dam. But that isn't the city's water. That's the water coming down through the aqueduct from Northern California, and that's distributed throughout the Southern California Metropolitan Water District service area. So some of that will probably go to orchards along the Santa Clara River. It's certainly feeding the Newhall area, but some of it will also, when mixed, might even end up in San Diego. It's a complex, interconnected series of water systems. We've had some bad history with some of the dams in Los Angeles itself. The Baldwin Hills Dam went down many years ago and killed a lot of people. And the San Francisco Dam, which was designed by Bill Mulholland, up above Newhall, it collapsed about, 80, 90 years ago, killed maybe 700 people. You don't want to live below a dam. Now, the dams that are being proposed, interestingly enough, are not on rivers. The Sites Dam that maybe you've heard about and is much pushed, they want to spend, I think, maybe $5 billion to build it, is built on a creek about the width of the desk that you're sitting at. It has a flow about what could be created with the water fountains in your building. And it's been proposed, this is an essential new dam to be built to take the excess surplus water out of the Sacramento River, but the Sacramento River has been claimed, 300% of its flow is already claimed, so I don't know what the excess is, and it's running low.
Okay, so that was kind of going to be my next question. Can proper infrastructure of dams and reservoirs be one of the keys to help out with the water situation that's going on?
For sure. Dams are an old kind of failing infrastructure, unfortunately, in a lot of places, though. A lot of dams around California and the nationwide haven't been maintained correctly. And as Professor Bowen mentioned, there have been some failures that have been pretty catastrophic. And so maintenance, yes, that is a big, important part of it that's not necessarily being done in all cases.
New dams are a problem. If you look at the total water budget of California, I'll throw some numbers at you. The total water budget of stuff that falls out of the sky is about 200 million acre feet of water a year. Now, a million acre feet, I know, is hard to imagine. California is a bit more than 100 million acre feet, 100 million acres, but 200 million acre feet. Most of that, though, is lost through evapotranspiration. So we end up with about maybe 70 million acre feet in all the rivers of the state. 28 million of that are up on the north coast, the Klamath River, the Eel River. 22 million are in the Sacramento Valley, and the rest is in the rest of the state. So if you said, well, can we get some new water? Well, you're not going to get it out of the Sacramento River. You're going to have to go up to the Eel. Now, that's going to cost you more than the state budget. And is that doable? Well, let me tell you, I'm an engineer. I work for a big construction company. That's a good idea. I'm a politician that gets his extra money from that company. That's a great idea. I'm a taxpayer. That's not a great idea. That's too much money and not enough yield. So we got a real problem that we built out on all the easy to get water and some of the difficult water. And anything they suggest is extraordinarily expensive and dubious at best, because if climate is changing, let's accept that it's getting drier. How are you going to fill up the larger dam? Where's the water coming from?
It's not.
It's not.
It's not coming.
So I would argue that maybe that's something like what Bill Mulholland did. I think he was one of the most brilliant people. And I used to tell my students, he's probably one of the handful of people that really understood and was creative in the history of California. He said, well, look, if we don't have the water and there's water someplace and other people are using it, why don't we go out and buy it from them? Just buy it from them. I have a shirt. If you, the city of Los Angeles, came and took my shirt, that would be theft. But if you came and said, you'll give me $50 for this shirt, you've got it immediately.
If you thought you didn't need the shirt then.
I use this because I'm going to go to something. How much does a farm cost? Well, let's take a square mile. A square mile, 640 acres, let's say roughly $10,000 an acre for open land. What are we going to plant on it? We'll plant alfalfa. That's one of the most commonly irrigated crops in the state. 10,000 times 640, that's $6.4 million in land. I'm the farmer. That's my first cost. The machinery to operate the farm are going to be way out over $1 million. I got to take a bank loan to get that. I'm raising alfalfa. Alfalfa requires about 7 feet of water a year to keep it going. That's roughly the amount of water needed for about 15,000 people around Northridge. Now, let's see, what are you worth? What are those 15,000 people worth? What are their houses worth? I think 15,000 of you could be persuaded to put some money in the pot, maybe buy my land with the water rights. And that's what Bill Mulholland did in the Owens Valley. The city went up and bought the land. And people said, when I was a professor, oh, they didn't pay much. Well, they paid in gold, and they paid for open desert land, in many cases, $40,000 an acre in modern money. So you guys are rich. You got the money. You just don't have the political will. So the question is, where should you buy the land? Well, I would argue what you should do is buy the legislature. Why not? You have a major chunk of the legislature. Just go out and buy the rest of them and tell them, put all that water that's going on the west side of the San Joaquin Valley into that aqueduct and get it down to us. Just go out and buy it.
All right,
I'm
Professor
being
Bowen,
a
we're going to
bit,
continue with our Next
Yeah, I'll
question.
get off track here.
Yeah.
I'm too much a religious fanatic after this many
We're-
years dealing with this issue.
Okay, well, I have a question again for both of you since you are both professors. What do you teach your students at your school? Do you guys talk about water conservation to your students?
Yes. I am a geology professor first and foremost, but I also teach earth science, oceanography, environmental science, and a large portion of what I go over is the human impact on natural processes. And water is one of the big ones, especially because groundwater, which is in California is about 40% of, on an average use, 60% on a drought year is where our water is coming from. And I spend a lot of time looking at how we are influencing the natural cycles and what can be done to mitigate some of these effects. So yes, I do definitely address that.
Well, as you guessed, I did. I did it too much. They told me I was drowning them in it. But let me give you an example. You go into a grocery store and you buy a pound of hamburger. How much water did it take?
A lot.
10 tons. 10 tons of water to make 1 pound of beef.
Mm-hmm.
Up here, the big growth industry in groundwater pumping is the almond industry. Oh my gosh, we're the world's greatest producers of almonds, which we ship, I guess most of them were shipped to China. I don't know.
It's about 7 gallons of water per almond, isn't it? Something like that.
Something like that. It's about almost a ton of water per pound of almonds. And you think about that. Now, I live in Roseville. All the open land to the west of us, which was just dry land farming with some cattle running around on it, have in the last, maybe 8 years been, I'd say maybe 30% of it very rapidly converted to almonds. And it's all being fed off of groundwater. They're pumping the groundwater right down to the bare bones from under my
Right
city.
down to the bottom.
Yeah, and I'd like to tell our city, oh, wake up. Go out and buy that land to preserve the water rights. Water is everything.
Mm-hmm. And the water, when you're pumping out the groundwater, it seems like a resource that you'll never run out of. But right now, in a lot of these places, especially with the almonds and a lot of the other agriculture areas, we are pumping it faster than it's replenishing. So we are actually now mining the groundwater. It is not, at this point, a renewable resource in a lot of the areas. And that's what some people miss in the discussion is it's not just going to refill next year. It's going to refill in a much slower time frame than we need it to. And that's a problem.
But when I was a graduate student at Berkeley, I was out on the empty, climatologically speaking, desert lands of the San Joaquin Valley, over on the west side, where Interstate 5 is now. As you drive along Interstate 5, it's not open desert for the most part anymore. There are fields that either are or are not being irrigated, but all of that has come since the last 50 years. Now, what has happened is they pumped a lot of water out. At the same time, they were using water out of the California Aqueduct. Mm-hmm. And in some places in the San Joaquin, the elevation of the ground has dropped over 30 and 40 feet. You build your house, let's say 80 years ago, it's 60 feet lower in elevation than it was. This is sort of incredible.
And this is not reversible either, unfortunately. No. What you're doing is collapsing the aquifer. And so you're losing any storage potential that it had. And so even if we do start giving the groundwater time to refill, there's nowhere for it to go anymore. You've taken away all the storage space and just gone thunk. And we're seeing a lot of that in the San Joaquin.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to wrap things up with a last question here. What do you guys do at home to save water?
I am trying to be as conscientious as I possibly can. That includes even the little things like turning off the tap when I'm brushing my teeth. You don't need to have the water running. Same as washing dishes. I don't wash my car in the driveway anymore. I will take it to, a drive-through where they do recycle the water. And little changes can at least make people think about what the problem is. But as we've said irrigation and agriculture is the biggest of the problems, and we can't directly impact that.
Let me give you something to think about. It's been suggested that maybe all of you should not have any ornamental vegetation because the outdoors uses more than the indoors. You do realize that the nursery products industry, which feeds that, is one of the single largest segments of the California agricultural industry. And let me tell you, the day you say no lawns in Southern California or anyplace else, you're going to have at least 250,000 Mexican hardworking men and their families out on the streets, because there are more people engaged in maintaining urban properties than in any other sector of the agricultural industry. So I would argue that, well, you don't want to waste water, but think before you jump to odd conclusions, because the urban impacts could be devastating on certain sectors of the working class.
Things can ripple outwards. Yes.
Yeah, if I live in Woodland Hills in a $1 million place, I can take it easy, but I'm not sure my gardener's going to be able to take it. So
Thank you so much again, Professor Bowen and Professor Lockard. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, answering some questions. They were very, very useful and informative. You're watching CSUN On Point. We'll be right back.
Found my heart out there in the Lopez. Trees make you feel smaller. Can't help but get lost again. If I need a break, know where I'm going. Where the water's flowing, I'd rather be floating. If it's something I can count on to be free.
Feel the beat of nature at a park or forest near you. Find a forest and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
I'm an actor in an ad reminding you that if you're high, just don't drive.
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings at 5:30. You can watch us on LA 36 and Santa Clarita Valley Television. For all of us here on Point, I'm Andre Lopez.